In the dark, dark tomb there was a dark, dark street, and in the dark, dark street there was a dark, dark office. In the dark, dark office there were some dark, dark stairs, and down the dark, dark stairs there was a dark, dark room, and in the dark, dark room was where the worst wrestling tropes go to die.
Hello there, I'm Ross Tweddell from Cultaholic, and welcome to the latest thrilling instalment of Straight to Hell, the show where my illustrious guest offers up a list of their pet peeves from the world of professional wrestling, and then they all get sent straight to hell to burn for the rest of eternity. Ahead of his big old championship defence against Marty Scurll at the Crockett Cup on April the 19th, joining us today is the reigning and defending NWA World Heavyweight Champion, Nick Aldis. Ross and Nick, over to you. Seamless. So we are joined by Nick Aldis. Nick, how are you today?
Doing well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on. So first of all, I was watching your interview with our good friend Chris Van Vliet recently, and you made a wonderful point about how professional wrestling sort of lost the prize fighter, big fight aspect to the big main event matches. Let's say everything goes well against Marty Scurll in April, and obviously you got the match against PCO as well. Who else in the wrestling world today do you see as a big money match for Nick Aldis?
Well, that's a good question, and I think that one of the great things about what we're doing with myself and Marty and with me and PCO and our relationship with Ring of Honor and stuff is we're showing the wrestling world and the wrestling fans that the big money matches can really be whatever you want them to be, as long as the promotions and the talent and everybody involved, is using their brains and not their ego. Because there's only, I've said this before, there's only so many top spots available in any promotion, any company. Like my whole career, people, why don't you go to WWE or since AEW? Why don't you go to AEW? Well, because there's already a bunch of top guys, and so it's a business decision to, because you can be a top guy in a different promotion and essentially you become kind of vital to the trickle down economics of the whole place. And that's the same with Marty at Ring of Honor. If he'd have left, that would have really put them in a difficult spot, and a lot of his friends, a lot of people he cares about. And the same could be argued about me now with the NWA. But it doesn't mean that and really when you're looking at it, all you're really thinking of is like, well, what's the benefit? Like if it's not money, then it's probably opponents and matches. But it's like, do you have to be under contract with the same promotion to have those matches? The conventional wisdom says yes, but reality is very different, and I think that's what me and Marty are showing. And it just, I hope that it opens the door to more money matches and breaks down those barriers that have previously prevented those from happening.
I mean, certainly from a fan's perspective, seeing more of those one-off sort of, matches never thought could happen is certainly a welcome thing, and hopefully more promotions open the doors and have working relationships with other promotions. I was just wondering, you mentioned AEW there, and I'm sorry to go there, but Jim Ross has made a comment on, I think it was on his podcast, and he said, I wish we had you in AEW. What's your reaction to that? I guess you're sick of hearing about AEW now.
He said that about me?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's kind of him to say. Jim, Jim's always been good to me. It's not like we've ever really interacted a huge amount, but he was at the like last year at the Cauliflower Alley. I was there I was asked by Dory Funk Jr. to present him with the Luthez Award at the Cauliflower Alley, and JR was hosting, and Jim was very, very complimentary of me that day and really gave me a very sort of hefty endorsement. It was very nice. And then he's had me on his show. I did his show before he did All In, and I, here and there. And obviously he's a big fan of Mickey and a big advocate for her. So I think like through that, there was obviously the link and everything. But yeah, that's kind of him to say. And it's nice. And look, I think that people got off on the wrong exit when I was talking about not going there, like in the sense that they thought I was trying to sort of throw shade or something, and that's not the case at all. I just looked at the landscape at the time and just thought, that's I've sort of started something here with the NWA. I was like, Cornette said once on one of the shows when he was commentating, he said, the NWA made Nick and Nick made the NWA. We sort of, there's a real sort of coexistence there. And I felt like there was a lot more to achieve, still in my current spot, that if that changes, then, I hope that those options are still available, but as of now, like I'm really happy doing what I'm doing, but I'm also very driven to take the NWA and, my position in the NWA to the highest heights I feel like I can take it.
What do you feel those highest heights are?
Arenas, pay-per-views, television, it's just there's this sort of impatience with fans that exists, where they and look, AEW obviously in that respect doesn't help a lot, because backed by, they have a huge amount of funding.
Mm-hmm.
And have been able to progress very, very quickly. Like they've got, from nothing to being on TNT, in less than a year. So like that unfortunately creates a sort of disproportionate expectation for a lot of other promotions. But hey, how come you're not on TV yet? How come you don't have pay-per-views? How come you don't have this? How come you don't have that? Like, how come, like even when I was talking to Billy about this the other day, even when guys, we bring a guy in for one show, and suddenly it's like, oh, so-and-so signed with the NWA. And it's like, whoa. No, they didn't sign. It's just, they've come in for a pay-per-view, or they've come in for a TV taping, like relax. And it's, so that can be frustrating sometimes. But, I in that respect, it's like, you just have to not let that noise cloud you and, and fuel your decision-making too much.
And just before we get going, back to that Chris Van Vliet interview, you made a little comment about how there's dialogue between the NWA and WWE. I was wondering if you could elaborate a bit more on that. Is there much to that, or is it just sort of like cordial stuff? And
I would imagine that there is the same amount of dialogue going on between WWE and almost every other promotion of any sort of significance. So it's not like I'm trying to suggest like, oh, there's, the worst thing in wrestling is that big things brewing, that's not what I'm trying to say. It's there has been communication, they're very aware of what we're doing, and obviously again, some of that is all, I'm also getting some of that secondhand, from Mickey as well. And, certain guys there will say, hey, tell Nick I saw this show, I thought it was great. Tell, I saw the pay-per-view, I saw this, I saw that, so there's just an awareness. And I think that it's in their best interests to have a dialogue with anything that makes an impact in the business, that has a sort of footprint, because, it's indicative of stuff that's resonating with a potential audience.
Certainly exciting times for NWA. But let's get cracking with the knocking, and let's find out what Nick Aldis wants to send down straight to hell. All right then, Nick, let's hear your first offering, please. All
right. First one that as far as I'm concerned, has got to go is One Fall. God, that's just so irritating. I'm sorry. I get it that it was like a funny thing for a minute. Or I know that fans like to be part of the show, but they're not the show, okay? And it's just, it's over now. It's irritating. And again, most of my big irritations in wrestling come from a subculture that exists that makes it very, very difficult for a new audience to relate to the product. And what I mean by that is that it's great if you're a really dedicated fan. If you watch every single promotion, if you're on the message boards and social media and this and that, and you read magazines and what that's great, good for you, right? But it shouldn't be a requirement to be able to understand what the hell's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want the business overall to thrive and grow, sometimes it has to be a little bit more inviting to a virgin audience member, to a newer audience member. So when you have all these little insider things and these like kind of silly nuances and, you know, phrases and code words and all this stuff, it's like going to a party and you weren't invited, you know, and or you know, it's like when you go with your girlfriend or your wife to like a work party and they've got all like inside work jokes and you're sitting there, ha ha ha, okay, you don't know what's going on. You're like, great, like, you know, and so and that's just one of those ones to me. It's run its course. Like, it was funny for a minute. Like, stop doing it.
So I guess that your outlook on professional wrestling is not like to build on the niche following it has, it's to bring in new fans from all over the place, make it more, is mainstream the right way to put it? I don't know.
Build on a niche audience is an oxymoron, in my opinion, because the whole definition of a niche audience is a small, concentrated audience of a very certain specific thing.
Yeah.
So it's well, unfortunately, what's happened is that the audience that is left has very discerning taste and has very definitive opinions on what wrestling should and shouldn't be, which is kind of ridiculous in the first place when you think about it, because there's no such thing as should in wrestling. Should is the most overused word in the business. Oh, you should do this. He should do that. They should have done this. It should. No. It's completely subjective. You know what I mean? What we do, I have to remind myself constantly that I make a good living doing something utterly ridiculous. You know, like it's like the fact that I'm able to make a good living, you know, putting on tights and having wrestling matches is such a privilege already. But the audience should also understand that, like, it's impossible to craft the business in the image of exactly what, you know, a certain group of fans want. It needs to be something that appeals to as many people as possible in order to thrive economically.
Yeah.
And there are times where it becomes kind of apparent that we're sort of the whole industry, and, you know, this is one of the reasons that the NWA is trying to push in a different direction and make, you know, create a true alternative, is that the situation exists now where there's a certain amount of fans left and they want it a certain way, but in order to satisfy those ones, you have to make a product that doesn't necessarily appeal to new fans. So you have to try and find that balancing act, and unfortunately, a lot of the time that results in no one being happy.
Yeah.
You know, so and you know, I empathize a great deal with WWE and everyone else who's in that position where they're going, look, we've got to try to build our audience again, but if we don't do this, this, and this, then the audience we have left are gonna dump on it and say that it sucked. So now we've got to. So how do we do it? You know, and that's what I thought the brand split was going to be. Look, NXT is this type of wrestling for you guys. SmackDown will be this type of wrestling for, you know, for more mainstream, and you know, Raw will be somewhere in the middle. I don't know, but yeah. It's unfortunately, because the fans who claim to love the business the most can often love it and hug it too tight. Do you know what I mean? Because they jump from show to show. Then they're going, no, this show needs to be exactly the way I want it to. And so does this one. And so does this one. All of these shows need to cater to me and only me and exactly what I want. And this sucked. Oh, boo, you know, and suddenly it's like, if you truly love the business, then you should accept that, you know, certain things aren't going to be your cup of tea, but they might help bring in new audience, which helps the overall business.
There's certainly one thing I'm finding more than ever in our job in reviewing wrestling is the tribalism aspect of everyone watching is more rampant than ever. Like, what's your sort of, like, obviously tribalism, I don't think it's a good thing for anybody. Well,
and look, we have to do our best to sort of curtail it with the NWA as well, because we've developed a core group of NWA fans who, you know, if you have to sort of watch very closely, because they can become very combative towards other wrestling brands, and you know, I'm always very quick to be like, we don't require you to hate any other wrestling to like this wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like that's such a, to me, is such a ridiculous thing. But at the same time, I want to get rid of this dismissive sort of attitude as well when it comes to, if somebody criticizes something of a, you know, for AEW, for example, so immediately it's like, oh, you're, you know, like they label
WWE
you like
shill.
You're old fashioned, or you're a WWE fanboy, you know what I mean, or whatever. And it's like, okay, but this thin-skinned sort of attitude, and I'm not saying that AEW, you know, everyone's guilty of it, but that you know, the thin-skinned mentality of like fans and the tribalism thing is just detrimental overall to the growth of the business.
But to bring it back to the 1-4, when did you first start hearing that in crowds? Can you remember? Because you've been around for a while now. It hasn't been there all the time.
I'm pretty sure it was a British thing. I'm pretty sure it started in Britain. I don't know what, you know, it was probably one of the hipster wrestling things like Progress or Rock Culture, or I don't know. Well, it was obviously one of those, but yeah, I don't know. It was, that's the first place I remember hearing it was Britain. And then now it sort of, it infected everything. It irritates me.
And just before we move on to our next point, is there any more sort of chants that really get you going, really get you know, annoyed?
Well, actually, my next point is of a similar ilk. But I mean, to me, like, all of, you know, this is awesome, you know, fight forever. I don't want to see a match go forever. Nobody wants to see that. Come on, guys. Like, most matches today are too long. Like you just like, anyone who's, and again, this is where the business has fallen victim to this sort of this expectations, you know, of like where they have to sort of meet all this criteria, like, oh well, it's not a 5-star match unless it goes over 20 minutes. Like, what are you talking about? Yeah. Like, this business is based on moments, not matches, right? It's about emotion and feeling. If it made you feel something, I don't care if it was 8 minutes or 80 minutes. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's about, what did it achieve? Did it achieve what it was supposed to achieve? But yeah, like when a match is going really well, like fight forever. No, take it home now. You don't get, like, whenever I hear that chant, I'm normally like, take it home now, because you've got them as high as they're going to go. Like, go home now. Yeah. You know, like, you're wanting more. Like, Brian Dixon used to say to me all the time, you know, the most successful promoter in British wrestling history, always leave them wanting more. You know, that's what he used to say. Next time. Right.
Yeah. There we go. The chant has gone to hell. Let's move on to point number 2. All right, Nick, we're 1 for 1. Let's make it 2 for 2.
Right. This one's along the same lines as the 1-4 thing. It's wrestling. Like, when you know, a couple of guys do a couple of exchanges of some holds, or some sort of mat wrestling or technical wrestling, there's always some dope in the audience who wants to shout out wrestling. And it's like, what are you, it's all wrestling, you morons. What are you doing? Like, shut up. You know, like, it's another thing that's like, I cringe when I hear it, and you know, I cringe when people shout it in my matches, like wrestling, like, as it, you know, like because it's got this weird negative connotation to it of almost like, you know, look at this is, you know, it's sort of submitting to this culture of like, oh, you're not a real wrestler unless your match involves some technical wrestling and some striking and some this and some that. Like, no, just shut up. Like, did you get over or did you not get over? Like, that's it. So, like, it's another thing. And again, I'm looking at it from the perspective of, if somebody came along who'd never come to wrestling before and you were sitting with them, and then some mouth breather, like five seats down, goes wrestling, you know, that person's going to look and just be like, where did you bring me? Like, what's going on? Who are these people?
Yeah.
So it's just like, look, enjoy it, but enjoy it naturally. Like, stop trying to force all these things and have all these little weird subculture kind of chants and phrases and words and stuff. It doesn't help the overall growth of the business. And it just makes you look like a dork. You're a grown adult.
So I'm guessing this is something you must hear quite a lot, not necessarily in NWA, but when you're traveling the world, because your sort of style is, I don't want to call it an outlier, but if you look at like sort of 10 matches on a card, I guess your style is going to stick out compared to the rest of the card, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I try to. I mean, but that's a conscious decision on my part too. I mean, I make an effort to try and watch the rest of the card and go, okay, if they're gonna get a lot of this, and this tonight, then I'm gonna try to give them this and this and this. And it's like, well, that's show business, you know. Everyone has certain flavors of ice cream or types of music or anything, but you know, it's always better when it's offset with something else, you know. So.
And have you ever snapped in the ring when someone shouted that and just had to say something back?
No, of course not. I'm a professional. But, you know, I mean, the only time I have anything to say is if someone's deliberately trying to just sort of disrupt the match for their own personal sort of gain, or to score points or get some sort of, you know, get some sort of clout with their fellow sort of troll people. But, you know, it's very rare. And I think most people at this point have come to realize that I'm probably not the guy you want to be doing that with. I'm pretty good with words, pretty quick on my feet, so the chances are it's not going to end well for them.
So there we have it. Wrestling, if you shout at Nick Aldis' matches, just run away. That's the message we're sending here.
I just don't shout it at all.
All right then, Nick, let's hear your third offering, please.
All right. I'm really going to need guys in the business to... Yeah, and I'm not saying all people, but there's a very strong majority of wrestling I see now where there are two types of sell. Okay, either these guys they kill each other with 10 different huge high impact moves, or, finishes or whatever, and there's two types of sell. They either get dumped on their head or something devastating, pop right back up and go, "Argh!" and like act like it didn't hurt at all and completely no sell it, or they go, "Oh, I'm not unconscious." Like, we have to find there has to be layers to this. We have to find a middle ground. It's so insulting to your intelligence to, like, every match I see someone get kicked in the head and crumple with their arms by their side and their head like bobbling as if they've been like completely knocked unconscious. And it's like, well, we know that didn't happen, because
that's not the natural reaction, is it?
You would be, well, if it did, it would be the end of the match. It would be over. Okay. When you see that happen in UFC or in a boxing match, it's very rare. And when it does, it's over, like immediately. And there are medical professionals in there in seconds, like preventing them from having any serious, hopefully from having any serious, long-term damage from something like that. That means that you have been hit so hard and so clean and so flush that your brain has rattled inside your head and has rendered you unconscious. Like, don't pretend that happened, from one enziguri, like, and then get up 10 seconds later and start running again and do it. So it's just like, again, most of my stuff comes from the mentality of, if my brother was watching this with me, or my dad, or someone who was kind of a fringe fan, or an occasional viewer of it, like, what are they going to say to that? They're going to go, "Oh, come on," like, it's. And then the other way is equally as idiotic, because it's like, okay, well, if that one didn't hurt, why did that one hurt?
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's something. It's actually leading into my next point, but it's a very specific sort of style and mentality that has kind of bled into the whole business, and it's one of the reasons why I think that a lot of casual viewers find it hard to absorb what they're seeing right now. Especially
with sort of UFC's rise of popularity over the past sort of 10 years as well.
Right, isn't that the most ironic thing, that there's all these people that are, sort of trying to borrow from MMA, to sort of make their pro wrestling more legitimate or more believable or more authentic, whatever. But then deciding to sell like that, which is, completely unrealistic. And like you said, we can see that happen in a legitimate contest and know that, okay, well, one of these isn't right,
So just to play devil's advocate, if I was to say to you, people who go to watch wrestling for more of the performance aspect and the show and entertainment and that sort of stuff feeds into their entertainment, what would you then say to that? Is it just not based in realism?
What do you mean by that? People who go for the entertainment aspect?
People who don't go for sort of a real, like, sort of looking for a real fight sort of thing. They go for more of the acrobatics and the flips and the...
I understand that completely. It's escapism. But what I mean is it's like true escapism and being taken on a ride by wrestlers there still has to be suspension of disbelief. There has to be elements of realism. You know, there has to be elements to it that you can convince yourself to a point, like, all right, you got me. I'm along for this ride. Not, oh, come on, like, please don't try to sell me on this, that this is real. You know, the best workers in the world are the ones who can make the most nominal offensive move seem like devastating, like Hulk Hogan doing the leg drop or The Rock doing people's elbow. It's like those, you know, when you break it down, it's completely ridiculous. But the way that they did it, the way that they got there with their nuances and their storytelling and their timing and their, you know, the layering to their storytelling. By the time you got to that, you were just like, I don't care. Like, this is it. You know, I'm with it. You know, I'm with you. Like, you know, kicking someone full force in the head and then that person like pretending that they're dead, but then 10 seconds later not being dead is like, well, which is it? You know, like, what's happening here? You know? So what's it like when you're in a match and somebody's like taking a move from you or like a strike from you and they've done that sort of sell? What's it like for you being in the ring with them? Well, irritating. It doesn't, you know, like I said, like, I understand that. I'm not saying that they can never be a sell like that, but it better be the finish. Yeah. Or it better be very close to the finish. Mm-hmm. You know, it's just, you lose me when you see that like halfway through a match and then, you know, there's 10 more minutes. Like, that's, you know, you've lost me. So there we have it. That sell, no more. All right, then, Nick, let's hear your fourth offering, please. All right, so this kind of leads on from the last one, and I really want to qualify this point before I make it, because I know that clickbaiters are going to pick this up and turn it into something it's not. But I need the Western wrestling's obsession with Japanese wrestling to just calm down a little bit. Okay, I've wrestled in Japan. Okay, but I love going to Japan, but I'll be honest with you, I don't love wrestling in Japan because it hurts. It's really physically taxing, and I don't get the same adrenaline rush from it because the audience don't react. You know, it's like I'm killing myself, and it's, you know, yeah. Oh, and look, this is, and what I mean by this, I understand and respect that they have their own thing, and it is, and there are some guys who are phenomenal, and there are some who are some of the best ever, the legends, right? But it works for their culture. It works for that audience, and I'm just so over this snobby sort of misconception that has sort of bled into the overall lexicon of modern wrestling, that somehow if it's Japanese, it's better. You know, like, this is how they do it in Japan. This is, you know, like, yeah, like, don't get me wrong. A lot of people will tell you that training, you know, learning to wrestle, like technique and all these things, you know, in Japan is probably overall the best, highest standard. Maybe that's true. I don't know. I didn't train there. I did train with some Noah guys at Harley Race's camp, but it's like, who's to say, you know? But, you know, yes, they have, most of them have very good technique. Most of them have, you know, really good intensity and everything like that. And they're very good athletically. But what I'm talking about is this sort of almost fetishizing of like anything that's sort of to do with that's Japanese, as somehow that makes it better, right? And I think that honestly, the ironic thing is that, like, you're working the audience, because most of them have never been to Japan. They've never been in a Japanese audience. You know, they're not Japanese. They've just been co-opted to believe that, like, oh, it's Japanese, it must be better because everyone. Otherwise, I better agree. Otherwise, everyone will think I'm stupid. You know, or everyone will think I'm not elevated enough. Like, as a wrestling fan, I'm not knowledgeable enough. Like, it's this sort of real, like, weird, snobby sort of culture that exists now. And it's like, I get that there are some guys who've gone over to Japan and have become really well-established stars in Japan. You know, some of them are good friends of mine. I don't understand why they would get Japanese writing on their tights and put Japanese stuff on there, you know, when they come back over here, though, you know, or when they, like, again, I'm always looking at things from the idea of trying to grow the business and attract new eyeballs and make it better for everyone. And I go, how is that going to help? That's not good. I don't, you know, a new fan comes in and they go, what is this, Japanese stuff? I don't, you know, it's like, let them be good at their thing. Like, here's a good example. When WWE goes over to Japan, they sell out.
Yeah.
And the reactions are unbelievable. It's huge. But they don't, Randy Orton isn't going over there and trying to wrestle like the Great Muta.
Yeah.
You know, like the New Day aren't going over there and you know, and not doing any of their shtick and just doing like chops and suplexing each other on the head and stuff. Like, no, they're doing all that. They're doing their shtick, like, because that's what they want. And it's like, you know, it's like, if you're a ballroom dancer, be the best ballroom dancer you can. Don't go and then start trying to do breakdancing because that's what the cool kids are doing. You know, it's like, that's kind of the way I look at what I do. I'm like, you know, I realize that I speak to the fan that maybe wishes for a different time.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I want to be able to be adaptable to work with someone who does that kind of stuff and tell that story of the contrast between the two. Like, how do I counteract this style of stuff with my style of stuff rather than just trying to do it as well? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Because one of the main criticisms you find with sort of WWE and their performance center is that everyone's trained the same way. But it seems from a fan looking inwards, the sort of, you know, the strong style of Japanese wrestling is infiltrating everywhere, all over the world.
Everywhere. It's the style now.
And everyone's wrestling, you know, the same.
Yes. And it's played well into my hands in the sense that now I get praised. You know, it's funny, the same fans that 2 years ago were like on me and burying me are now saying like, oh, he's so good. He's so smooth and he's such a good storyteller and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I've been doing the same It's just, there's just no one, it's just very few people doing it now. Like, you know, sometimes I see these, you know, there's this sort of small collection of fans who like criticize Randy Orton. I'm going like, are you kidding? Randy's one of the best of all time. Like, he's unbelievable how good he is. You know? It's just like, and that's why he's been on top for so long, because a regular everyday person can still decide, oh, I'll go to there's a WWE show in town. Oh, Randy Orton. Oh yeah, I like Randy Orton. You know, it's like, get over yourselves. He's as good as it gets, man. Like, because he's classically trained and has, you know, those fundamental qualities that people look for in any kind of sporting or entertainment star. Someone who doesn't look like them, someone who carries themselves better, someone who's, you know, presents themselves better, and, you know, and is physically superior. Like, that's to me that's what I want to pay to see, you know, not necessarily paying to see like someone who's, you know, oh, this guy's really obsessed with a certain culture and a certain type of wrestling and is, you know, doing all like it's great, but that's just, it has a place on the card. I don't want to see it every match.
I'll tell you, I've been guilty myself on our channel for sort of not criticizing Randy Orton, but for saying he does one too many headlock. But I think that's because we've been sort of conditioned as fans to expect all the thrills and spills, and then he comes along and yourself comes along with a completely different style, and we're not for six.
Okay. Well, look, I use a lot of holds too. You know why? Because if my match is on TV or on a pay-per-view, I'm not going to, you know, blow too much smoke up my own ass here, but I've done enough commentating and I'm pretty good at it. Like, I like broadcasting, I like commentating. and I've been, you know, I've been praised for it when I've done it for Ring of Honor and other places. But I can tell you that helped me a lot with my work, because once you're commentating, if a match is like something, never stopping, always moving, it's really hard to like tell a story, to explain to the audience what the hell's going on, or like what emotions they're feeling. Or, you know, I can tell you from experience, there's nothing like, you know, when your leg hurts or, you know, something, and that figure four is like, it's punishing, you know, whatever you're talking about. Or if you've got a bunch of stuff you need to cover, because let's face it now, commentators have sometimes they have a million things they need to try to get over. Don't forget to use the hashtag, you know, Survivor Series to blah, 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 blah. And like, you know, the network and this and that and, you know, whatever. It's like, you can't do that when it's just like, duck, go behind, switch, reverse, something, over the top, ducks underneath, runs up the ropes, jumps over the top of him for no reason. He runs against the ropes, and he runs and follows him into the ropes. Then he runs against the other set of ropes, and it's like, what's happening here, right? Boom, let that happen, bam, stick a hold on. Now you've got a minute, 90 seconds where the audience can relax, take everything in, take a breath, and the announcers can say like, oh, this is what's happening. He wants it so badly. He's been the champion for this long. He wants it so bad he can taste it. You know, that's the difference.
Yeah. We see your son come in the background there.
What? Hey, Daddy's on the phone.
Daddy. Are you a fan of Japanese wrestling?
Yes.
All right, then, Nick, let's hear your fifth and final offering, please.
Right. This one is a sort of wider topic. And it's something that actually, you know, that's very prevalent in our culture in general, but it's, you know, wrestling and the wrestling subculture is often a microcosm of what's going on in general culture. And it's what I call confirmation bias, right? And it's really indicative of the overall, like we talked about earlier, this very tribal, polarized sort of culture that exists now, where if you like one thing, you have to hate the other thing. And if you're on this team, you've got to hate this team. And if you like this one, you have to hate that one. And the whole thing is silly, but there's this sort of thing that exists in all culture, but in wrestling, they do it too, where they use like confirmation bias to prove a point. So for example, there might be a segment on TV that everybody hates, you know, like everyone goes, oh, that was the worst thing ever, like, you know, and then the next, well, hey, the rating was good. You know, the rating was good for that's confirmation bias, because unless you're trying to convince me that the segment was so amazing that all these people were calling their friends or texting their friends or looking on Twitter and going, oh, I better tune into this show, and adding to that rating, the chances are, like, the rating that you see today is more indicative of what they saw last week or the week before that or the week before that. I'm friends with Eric Bischoff, and, you know, I've talked to him a bunch about ratings and that whole sort of culture of and, you know, when you look at, like, if your opinion is anywhere similar to mine, you would probably think that the overall quality of the product in 1997 was way better than 1998, right? Like, 97, you had NWO was cooking, Sting was cooking, you know, you had like a great undercard at WCW, and that, you know, everything was sort of firing all cylinders. 97 in WWF, Steve Austin was like becoming like this, you know, was just on this monumental rise. Bret Hart was at his peak. Shawn Michaels was doing DX. Undertaker was on top. You know, Undertaker was killing it, right? And yeah, you know, Kane debuts at the end of the year. So like, but the ratings in '98 smoked the ratings in 1997. But in 1998, overall, I felt like, you know, a lot of the stuff there was more focus on the sort of shock value stuff, you know, and matches were shorter, and it was a bit more like Jerry Stringery, you know, sort of, and again, this is just my opinion, but it's it takes a long time. This is what Bischoff told me, you know, and it makes a lot of sense. It's like, it takes a long time for the ratings to catch up with the quality of the show.
Yeah.
Like for a casual everyday television viewer, they have to hear something is good, and then they have to hear it again and again and again before they finally go, maybe I will check it out. And here's my point to this: how many times have you thought to yourself, like, you know, because the way we watch television is completely different now, right? We binge watch stuff. I binge watch stuff mostly. I very rarely watch stuff like as it happens. Yeah. Now, a lot of the time when I decide to sort of start something new, invest in something new, it's because I've heard it several times from reputable people that I trust. Oh man, you've got to check out this show. You've got to check out this show. And you go, and you know, how many times have you said, I really need to start watching that? I've heard that, you know, I've heard that from many people. I really want to start it, but you still don't. You know, eventually you do. And eventually you go, all right, here we go. I'll get, you know, and now, and you know, that's a rating point, but that might not be for months.
Yeah.
You know, and it's this silly confirmation bias we have of like, some segment, everyone can watch it, and everyone who's watching can understand that it was a dog shit segment. It was just terrible. But like the immediate defense of, oh, hey, well, it did a good number. Yeah, did a great number.
But people might be watching that just to see how bad it was, not necessarily because it was good.
That could be true too, or it could just be that, you know, the rest of the show up to that point had been good enough, or they've promoted the hell out of it, so that it was like. But the reality is, like, if they promote the hell out of a segment, so it does a slight bump in the ratings, right? If it was good, then the rating next week will be the same. But if it's not, then there's your answer, in my opinion.
So how much? Sorry.
No, and it's like, and there are other examples of confirmation bias, like, you know, oh, like so and so's like, you know, a great worker. Okay, like, did he sell any tickets? You know, like. Well, no, you know, but he's consistently getting 4 or 5 star matches from who?
Yeah, it's just an opinion,
you know, right? It's a subjective thing, and people, you know, there are confirmation bias to support any opinion, and ultimately, it's like that's all it is. It's opinion.
Yeah. In the locker room, how much stock is put on TV ratings and stuff? Because as we said before, there are 100 ways to watch television now compared to 1997 when things were on the up and up. So I think, personally, from a fan's perspective, there's too much stock put in ratings just because there is so many different ways to.
I've always believed that. You know, and you know, for me, obviously, it's a little different now because obviously our metrics are a YouTube show, and then, you know, where you know, our most important metric to measure how well we're connecting is our pay-per-view buys as a percentage of our overall viewers, and so far we're tracking at like 2%, which might not sound like a lot, but historically that's quite a good number,
right?
You know, if 2 out of every 100 people watching your show go, you know what, I am going to pay $25 or $35 or whatever for this pay-per-view, like, I am invested enough. That's pretty good going. You know, a lot of the time the average is more like 1%.
Yeah. So, you know, to be tracking at 2%, and so we're going, okay, how do we bump that number up to 3%? You know, how do we make it like, you know, how do we, and we're you know, we're in a different position because we don't have, we're not in a position right now where we're paid a rights fee by a television provider to provide them with a show. So we don't have parameters we have to fall within. We don't have targets we have to meet, and we don't have all these different things. And so, you know, it's not my place to say like who's doing things right or wrong in that respect. But yes, I do think that overall there's a lot of stock placed in ratings, which are, you know, I know someone who worked for Nielsen, and you know, when they really broke down and explained to me like how the Nielsen rating system worked, and it's like, it's complete, it's so hard, it's so inaccurate, it's so far away from what, you know, it's like, how could you possibly You know, it's just it's very difficult to you know, because it's like basically it's people who choose to take part in the survey who remember to turn on their little thing on their TV, you know, and it monitors what they want. It's like, who knows? There's just so many variables that play into that, and it's like, so, you know, overall it's like, you know, when things are going well, when people are buying your merchandise or buying tickets or buying pay-per-views.
Yeah. So there we have it. Confirmation bias has gone straight to hell. So just before we go, Nick, do you have anything to plug to the World Wide Web?
Well, the one thing I sincerely hope everybody does watching this is to support the NWA and buy the Crockett Cup. It will be live on April 19th from Atlanta, and it will be myself and Marty Skrull one more time, and the stakes are very, very high. And it's going to be and obviously it's the Crockett Cup, so there's, you know, it's a great traditional historic tag team tournament, some great wrestlers from multiple promotions all over the world, and we're, you know, if you want to see a genuine pay-per-view super card with some of the best from all over the world, multiple different promotions, no politics, no BS, the Crockett Cup's going to be something very special. And the NWA, our whole philosophy is to not overpromise, but to overdeliver. But I am promising that it will be worth your money and worth your time.
I'm on board. I love power.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear it.
So Nick,
we just got to keep chipping away at it, man. Just get more eyeballs on it. We're building we see a lot of feedback that there are people watching our show who don't watch anything else. Mm-hmm. You know, they used to watch WCW. You know, people in the States, you know, there was a huge chunk of people in the States who lived particularly in the South, who didn't watch, you know, WWE just doesn't resonate with them. You know, NWA and WCW was their wrestling. Like, that was, you know, so to them, they thought of it as like, they thought of that as the number one wrestling. So that when that went away, they kind of went, I don't want to watch the number two. You know, even though they knew WWF was more popular, they looked at it as like, it would be like if the Premier League went away and you just had the Champions League. Yeah. You know what I mean? Where it's kind of like, oh, it's good, I guess, but, you know, I like, you know, it doesn't feel like it's mine anymore.
Yeah. So that was it. Nothing else to plug?
No, man, just, you know, follow me on my socials at Real Nick Aldis on Twitter, at Nick Aldis on Instagram. You know, nickaldis.com is got some great merchandise stuff. You can buy my book, Superstar Body. I'm actually working on a second book, as that might be something interesting to put, covering basically the last 2 years of my personal journey and the NWA, sort of from Billy buying the company or buying the rights to the company, buying the brand, whatever you want to call it, to where we are now, and just basically kind of, you know, going into all the details of how that came to be and you know, how that worked. So hopefully it should be interesting for NWA fans.
It should be,
and for anyone who's not interested in the business. You
were in there from the start, weren't you? Like the very start.
Yeah.
One to look out for sure. But just left to say thanks very much for that. It was very interesting. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time on Straight to Hell.
Thanks for watching. Let us know what you think in the comments below. You can follow us on Twitter at Cultaholic. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cultaholic. And if you enjoy what we do here at Cultaholic, you can pledge to our Patreon page, patreon.com/Cultaholic. Hit subscribe and join us.